We're gonna get started, chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you guys come check us out on Twitch, man. TTV backslash StaySakai, twitch.tv backslash StaySakai. Sorry, I can't really talk right now. I was just outside and it's way hotter than I thought, and it's throwing my brain cells all the way off. But we're gonna watch a video by MUJIN. It's how to lose a fortune by trusting ChatGPT as your lawyer. This is crazy. If you guys aren't already, subscribe to MUJIN. He makes pretty good content, honestly. Let's check it out. It's like 44 minutes, but you know, it'll be faster. It'll be over before you know it.
30th, 2022, ChatGPT would release to the world. On November 30th, 2022, ChatGPT would release to the world.
Damn, it's been out for 4 years already. That's crazy.
Hordes of students who would finally figure out a way to get their homework done for free and with zero effort. However, as time went by, many others would start to increasingly rely on AI.
Is it weird for me, a human, to be in love with ChatGPT? When was this posted? A year ago? Bruh. We got there so fast. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos about like the girl who's like in love with her like ChatGPT. There's like a whole subreddit for it. We might go over it one day, but it's crazy.
Just with small errands or things that help them become more productive at work, but also major life milestones like love, relying on this AI chatbot to be their partner in life. And while I'm very happy for these people and can't wait for the wedding, there's a very big problem. And that's the fact that ChatGPT is far from perfect. In fact, it can hallucinate. One great recent example.
Oh, definitely. It's also a way that it's like not. I mean, obviously it's not real, but it's also just like, imagine having a partner that agrees with you all the time, like everything. Like, be like, hey babe, you know, I was thinking about starting a business where I wash the bottom of people's shoes. I guess that's not a good example, but just imagine you come up with like some crazy dumb idea, and like your partner's like, yeah, it's a great idea, babe. Invest all your money, like, you know what I'm saying? Take out all your money on your 401k, put it into that business. That's what ChatGPT does. It's just like it's gonna agree with like everything that you ask it, to be honest, and it's gonna make you delusional as much as it's delusional.
Hey, I want to wash my car, but the car wash is very, very close to my house. Should I walk there or drive there? The obvious answer is drive there because you want to wash your car. What does ChatGPT say? Walk to the car wash.
Oh my God.
What exactly? I don't know. Just walk. Trust me. This is not an isolated incident by any means. There have been countless studies delving into these hallucinations or instances of AI psychosis, which encourage the user into delusional thinking. And this has nothing to do with a particular demographic. Anyone can fall victim to this delusion.
Yeah, and especially like if you're in that point, right? If you're at that point already where you're already, you know, kind of teeter-tottering on delusions, anything that's going to agree with you, like especially if you're like manic, right? Like I know people who have like manic episodes and stuff like that. If you're already at that point, bro, it's just going to tilt you right over the edge.
Including the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar video game conglomerate.
That's crazy.
He would embrace the delusion so much offered to him by ChatGPT that he would start to ignore the legal counsel of the lawyers that work for him. He would make up a plan with ChatGPT to avoid having to pay $250 million. Yes, $250 million in a deal that he had already agreed to. ChatGPT would fuel his delusions, telling him, yes, you can totally do this. The result? One of the most embarrassing lawsuits in video game history.
Yeah, of course, because it's like they're gonna like if they're saying that he's used ChatGPT to try to avoid paying like $250,000, which, by the way, I'm interested to see why he even agreed to that. What were the terms on that? But also on top of that, like, yeah, they're going to go through all your records. They're going to see that you like talk to ChatGPT and try to wiggle your way out of this, which honestly just gives like the judge and the jury more proof that like you're in the wrong, you know?
It would turn out that every single thing that the CEO did was outlined clearly by ChatGPT in a step-by-step basis. He literally let it take control of his entire life.
See, that's what I'm saying, bro. And you, listen, if you owe me $250,000, I'm going to get my money, bro. I'm getting my money, bro. $250,000, dude. Chat, what would you do? YouTube, comment in the comment section below, like, what would you do with $250,000, bro? Like, what's the first thing you do? I know the first thing I would do. It doesn't matter if it's $250,000. It doesn't matter if it's $500,000. It doesn't matter if it's $2 million, bro. I know the first thing I'm gonna do if I get some money like that, I'm gonna get something to eat. What comes afterwards, different stuff. But what's the first thing you guys would do if you got $250,000, bro?
It was incredibly humiliating to both the CEO and his company, ruining the reputation they had so carefully built for so many years over a mistake that even an intern wouldn't make. I've been following the story.
Damn, and if you guys look at that, it was submitted on January 9th, and then the date decided was March 16th. Is that saying that it like took less than 2 months for them to like file the lawsuit and then like the jury come to a conclusion? And it's also the day after my birthday. It's pretty cool.
Over a mistake that even an intern wouldn't make. I've been following the story closely ever since it began.
Subnautica 2, okay.
Now that it's finally come to somewhat of a conclusion.
What does it say? CEO asks ChatGPT how to avoid $250 million contract, ignoring his lawyers, losing terribly in court. The CEO of Crafton uses ChatGPT to push out the head of the studio developing Subnautica 2 against the advice of his own legal team, and failed miserably. Oh, snap. Okay.
We have to talk about it because it's truly unprecedented. So you already know the drill. Let's do this. The only thing more fun than driving like a madman around the city is doing so in an anime-style open-world RPG game.
We don't skip ads here.
The ability to do so on scooters, go-karts, luxury cars, sports cars, you name it. And the only place where you're able to do that is, of course,
why did it look like a nuke on the back?
A game not just impressive in scale, but also impressive down to the most minute details. Whether it be NPC interactions, dynamic weather, or the fact that you can fully explore
you can drive the train
buildings. You can choose to do so with full freedom, whether it be in first person or third person, either in solo or in multiplayer.
Is this just like
things to do.
Genshin Impact?
On the
Wait, what?
Of April 2026, you'll be able to unlock an S-class character, Chiz, by simply leveling up. And my favorite part is the fact that there's no 50-50 mechanics on the gacha banner. You get the character you want, and that's it. So look, if that all sounds interesting to you, then make sure to get NTE today by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment. Thank you so much.
I'm confused. What the heck is even that? It looked like Gran Turismo mixed with Genshin Impact. Oh, I'm confused.
NTE for sponsoring this video.
Not for me, but yeah.
All right, so to really understand how this all began, we have to go all the way back to the year 2013, when Steam, the beloved games platform on PC, would release Early Access, an absolute turning point in game development. It would allow you to release an incomplete game, charge money for it.
So Early Access came out in 2013. Wow.
With the hopes of releasing it one day.
It's been 13 years since they first released Early Access on Steam. That's cool.
It was actually a program that was heavily criticized in the first few years after its release. For example, on March 20th, 2015, PC Mag had written an article titled 8 Early Access Video Games That Were Horrible Messes. Early access games sounded great, assuming that developers actually had an intention of completing them one day. However, some developers would release an early access game incomplete and would just abandon it or just stop working on it after people had paid money for it with the hopes of it releasing.
Oh, I see. Got you. Yeah.
While, yes, for a while, we did have to deal with a lot of early access slop. It really took some time for people to start to truly appreciate how amazing the early access program was for developers that needed it.
Yeah, because I guess like now when I think of early access, I don't think about I mean, even now, sometimes it's still kind of sloppy, right? Especially like with like the bigger AAA stuff. But when I think about early access now, I don't really think about like you paying for it. These needle things are bothering me. I don't think about like you're paying for it. I just think about like for example, Deadlock. Like we literally play Deadlock on stream all the time. That's technically in early access right now, but we didn't pay for it, we just got invited.
The Guardian uses the example of the game Kenshi. However, in this video, the amazing example of early access comes from the developer Unknown Worlds. Prior to Steam Early Access launching, they were mostly known for the game Natural Selection 2, a fast-paced multiplayer shooter that pits aliens against humans. Now, it wasn't mainstream by any means, it wasn't making millions of dollars, but it did have a community that appreciated it, and the developer had somewhat of a fan base because of it. Here's the deal though. This game had released around 2012, and it somewhat coincided with the release of Minecraft at the end of 2011. This was
shit.
important because the director of Unknown Worlds, Charlie Cleveland, would note that in his opinion, Minecraft transformed the game industry and threw away all traditional challenge-oriented and progression-oriented games. He'd revealed that after the release of Natural Selection 2, the team felt exhausted, and it would prompt them to make a game inspired by Minecraft that involved them trying something completely new. So on December 2013,
Oh,
Unknown
Subnautica,
Worlds would
bro.
announce an ocean-based game titled Subnautica, releasing concept art, just one image showing where the game would take place. At the time, the game was just a prototype. And Hugh Jeremy, the head of public relations at the studio, would literally say, "We just don't know what Subnautica is yet. We can't even point to specific genre. We just don't know." The only thing they knew was what was in the prototype. And it involved designing, building, and crewing up submarines. And it would also, of course, be in first person. But look, at the time, this was a very interesting announcement because this was a developer who had already made a game that was loved by a community who was hoping to tackle a very underutilized setting in gaming, the ocean. The water, right? Everything was above land in games, but this was open world under the water.
Yeah, because like most of the time, I feel like in gaming, I feel like there's always that running gag joke that it's like, everybody hates water levels. You know what I mean? So having a game that's like completely underwater, I feel like they maybe were just like, it's just whatever. We're gonna try something different and see what happens. But I know that Subnautica was pretty successful. I know a lot of people like this game a lot.
Definitely piqued people's curiosity. And thankfully, people didn't really have to wait that long to see what this game was all about because 1 year later, on December 2014, Subnautica would come out on Steam Early Access. And according to this article from Eurogamer, it would cost £15, a heavily discounted price for early access because today it costs €30 at full price.
Oh,
and even
wow.
though it had come out in early access, this game was very well received.
Yeah,
it was
definitely.
innovative, people loved where it was based, the gameplay was awesome, and you truly felt like you were getting value for your money. It very quickly became critically acclaimed. Overall, it would take the game around 3 years to go from early access to full release, launching on January 2018. And as you can see, by the incredible amount of positive reviews reaching overwhelmingly positive on Steam,
Overwhelmingly
this
positive.
game
That's
did
what's up.
not in any way screw up its launch. If anything, it's one of the best examples in the entirety of the Steam library that show what early access can truly do. So it came as no surprise that barely 2 years after their full launch,
5 million
they would have
copies,
sold
wow.
a total of over 5 million copies. An astounding number, especially for an indie developer. In fact, numbers like these are so rare to find that when they do happen, they start attracting a lot of attention. When you start making money and find success, people take notice. And that's exactly
big companies want to start buying you, bro. Whenever you start to make money like that, because I feel like it used to be the goal for like indie developers is to like make a game that people really love and then get a lot of notoriety and then get involved or get like essentially just bought out by like a AAA company to get like more support. But now I think it's the opposite. I think AAA games have been like, so especially like people like Suits and stuff in AAA games have been such a detriment to like video games and like the video game space that people or indie developers try to stay as indie as possible nowadays. But I'm guessing that this is not the case here.
what happened here, because Unknown Worlds had caught the attention of the gaming conglomerate Krafton. What is Krafton? Well, they have like over a dozen different studios and
PUBG,
a dozen
whoa.
different games. Most notably, they are the company behind PUBG Battlegrounds.
They got Ronin the Last Samurai, PUBG. I don't know any other ones. My Little Puppy. I never heard of that before. You guys know that game?
And they were also the founders of Striking Distance Studios, the studio behind the game The Callisto Protocol, which wasn't really received that well, but still.
That game was like the Dead Space a game. It was like the guy who made Dead Space, but he couldn't actually call it Dead Space anymore because they had bought the rights to the name.
It was a AAA game, I guess. This is a Korean company that is worth over $1.9 billion. They saw how successful Subnautica was, and they wanted a piece of that success as soon as possible. How soon, you might ask? Well, as soon as the end of 2021, barely a year after Unknown Worlds had announced that they had sold over 5 million copies of Subnautica, Krafton would swoop in and acquire the entire studio with 100% ownership stake for a maximum of $750 million.
Holy
And you're
crap.
probably wondering, what do you mean for a maximum? Like, how much did they actually pay? Well, essentially, they had paid $500 million for the
Okay.
entire studio, right? They own everything the studio had ever done and ever will make. That's $500 million. And on top of that, they also added an option in the contract of offering an additional $250 million in earnings, depending on the achievements of Unknown Worlds after the merger. Now,
Oh, so that's where the 250 million comes in play. So they paid 500 million to obtain the studio, and then they promised him an extra 250 million based off of the performance. So I'm guessing that because they were saying that like Subnautica 2, maybe they didn't think it was going to perform as well as it did, and it really did. And he tried to get out of the contract. Let's find out.
this achievement was still unknown to the public, but Crafton and Unknown Worlds knew exactly what it was going to be: Subnautica 2. But they didn't just buy Unknown Worlds for that. They knew that there was still going to be many more sales to come for Subnautica 1. Because as recently as May 2025, Subnautica would come out on mobile, reaching an entirely different platform with many more sales. And by February 2026, Subnautica had sold over 18.5 million units. I mean, God, in comparison, Expedition 33 sold 8 million. And this is a widely critically acclaimed game that had won so many game awards. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that
They won Game Awards, but they didn't keep them because we found out that they use AI. Come on, bro. Get your sources on tight, bro. Come on.
0.5 million units is incredible. So Crafton had already made quite a bit of money thanks to this already. As for the co-founders of the studio, it made sense as to why they accepted the crazy $500 million deal.
Estimated gross revenue 274 million. Oh my god, dude. They've had $32 million in refunds. The Steam cut is 48 million. They've made Steam a crap ton of money, bro. Holy.
Steam alone, this game had made over $274 million in gross revenue. But after adjusted regional pricing, discounts, refunds, the cut Steam takes, which is 30%, and the VAT plus sales tax,
they made 80 million.
Really made like around maybe $80 million. So $500 million to buy the studio outright, plus a chance at getting $250 million in bonuses, that's more than 6 times than what Subnautica made on Steam alone in net revenue. So it seemed like this deal was genuinely mutually beneficial. Both sides benefited and knew what they were getting themselves into, just like how every deal should be. And so as expected, around October 2024, Subnautica 2 Early Access would get announced, with a release date set for 2025. To Crafton, this was going to be their main money printing machine. This is what they placed all their bets on. If Subnautica 1 could sell over 18.5 million copies, then this was going to sell that and then some. This wasn't based on delusion, it was based on facts. Steam allows you to wishlist games. That way your friends can see your wishlist.
Top wishlisted Deadlock. That's us, gang. That's us. That's us. Deadlock is crazy that like I know this is about Subnautica 2, but we got to bring it back to Deadlock because we've been playing Deadlock so much on stream, and I've been playing it just in general. But the fact that Deadlock is such a high wishlisted game, like, and it's like only invite only, bro. It's crazy, bro.
We gift them to you, but also more importantly, if you wishlist a game that hasn't come out yet, you get notified. As of today, by the time I upload this video, Subnautica 2 is the most wishlisted game on the entirety of the Steam platform. It was simply that highly anticipated. But as you already know, we're in 2026. This game was meant to come out in 2025.
Oh, what happened?
What happened? Well, it turned out that Crafton had no intention of honoring their $250 million.
Oh, heck no.
And one day, in the summer of 2025, the co-founders would all wake up to a random email telling them that actually their services are no longer needed because they're fired. On the 2nd of July, 2025, Crafton would put out a press release that came out of nowhere, saying Crafton announces gaming industry veteran Steve Paputzis as new CEO of Unknown Worlds, specifying Paputzis replaces the previous leadership team, Ted Gill, Charlie Cleveland, and Max McGuire, effective immediately. These are the 3 co-founders of Unknown Worlds.
They just woke up one day and they were like, "You're fired." Bruh.
Then specified that they sought to keep them on, right? They tried their best to keep them, but that they wished them the best on their next endeavors. The CEO of Krafton, C.H. Kim, would then say, "There is nothing more important than the gamer experience. Given the anticipation around Subnautica 2, we owe our players nothing less than the best possible game as soon as possible." And
That's so
so,
scummy. That's so scummy knowing that now, knowing what we know, right? Knowing that the fact that this guy fired these the founders of Outer World Games because of ChatGPT, because he was trying to like finagle his way out of a $250 million contract is insane, bro.
like that, the game director, the technical director, and the CEO of Unknown Worlds were out and replaced by one person who, as far as we knew, had nothing to do with the studio. Additionally, this press release, as noted by Kotaku at the time, felt somewhat passive aggressive. One paragraph in this press release that we didn't read was, "As part of its oversight, Grafton is committed to achieving regular milestones to assess progress across its creative studios. These reviews, based on clearly defined metrics and targets, will help ensure that games meet both creative and quality standards. This process is essential to delivering the right game at the right time."
It's also ironic as hell that this guy is talking about some, where is it? That it helps ensure games meet both creative and quality standards while he's using AI. Creative and quality standards are two things that don't exist with AI at the same time. That's just not how that works, brother.
Unknown Worlds' new leadership fully supports this process and is committed to meeting player expectations. So it really made it seem like these three co-founders were not doing a good job.
Yeah.
Like they screwed up and just couldn't make the game in time, not respecting the company's milestones. But by now, it was safe to say that if you were looking forward to the game releasing anytime soon, you probably weren't feeling too good knowing that the co-founders, the leaders of the studio, were let go so abruptly. This right here was a post made on the r/PC Gaming subreddit, now deleted, urging everyone to boycott the game's release, not buying it because of this. Seeing that the fan base was absolutely on fire and didn't even know what to believe anymore, Unknown Worlds would release their own statement a day later after all the firing, on July 3rd, 2025. This statement would re-emphasize that they're still confident with Subnautica 2, that they're fully supporting the new CEO that just arrived, and that this game that the team has been working on has not changed at all. The studio still includes the veterans that made Subnautica 1, and their commitment to this open development of early access Subnautica 2.
I wonder if this is written by the actual people that got fired, or if it's written by Krafton, because like they own the studio now, so it's like they could probably put out a release like this by themselves. You know what I mean?
Not changed. They'd end this by saying, "Nothing has changed with how the game is structured. It will remain a single-player experience with optional cooperative multiplayer. No subscriptions, no loot boxes, no battle pass, no microtransactions." So look, this was nice and all, but at the end of the day, Unknown Worlds is 100% owned by Krafton. This statement was most definitely approved by Krafton, if not written by them.
That's what I'm saying,
to
bro.
calm down the community. There were still theories floating around everywhere. But then, 2 days later, the user Flera, who was actually Charlie Cleveland, the fired game director of Subnautica 1 and 2, would make a Reddit post on the subreddit r/Subnautica. In it, he would reminisce about his journey with game development, how it started more than 25 years ago, how it all started with him making a Half-Life mod called Natural Selection 1. He would talk about his journey with the studio, how the community helped shape Subnautica 1, and how even with all this, they also failed making one game previously called Moonbreaker, and how he and the team learned from it. What's most interesting in all this statement, though, was what would come at the end. So you can see why. For Max, Ted, myself, the Unknown Worlds team, and for our community, the events of this week have been quite a shock. We know that the game is ready for early access release, and we know you're ready to play it. And while we thought that this was going to be our decision to make, at least for now, that decision is in Krafton's hands. After all these years, to find that I'm no longer able to work at the company I started stings.
Definitely,
end
bro.
this with a sentence saying, "And I also want you to know that this is not where the story ends." So barely a week into him
Chills.
being fired, things were starting to get very interesting and messy. Krafton, with their passive-aggressive messaging, were indicating that this was actually their fault for having been fired, that the game's milestones were not met, that it was pretty much behind schedule. But here, you had the game director himself and one of the co-founders say, actually, the game was ready. It was meant to come out on early access soon. So already both sides of the story were so different.
Yep.
4 days later, on July 9th, Bloomberg would release a bombshell of an article titled
Is Bloomberg gone? Because what is up with this web design, bro? Are they gone now? Because this web design looks crazy bad. Like it looks like this looks like a web page from like the early 2000s, bro. Like Windows like 7 type shit. This is crazy.
delay Subnautica 2 game ahead of $250 million payout. Now, Crafton would specify to Bloomberg this decision was not influenced by any contractual or financial considerations. But Bloomberg would specify the $250 million bonus was due to kick in if Unknown Worlds hit certain revenue targets by the end of 2025, according to the purchase agreement, which was reviewed by Bloomberg.
So maybe they stopped the early access from going live because it was supposed to come out in 2025. So I'm guessing that he stopped it from going live so they wouldn't get the revenue and he would have to pay them the 25 million because he knew it was going to do it.
Subnautica 2 into next year, the company is unlikely to hit those targets, and therefore the employees may not be eligible for a payout.
Yeah, there it is.
Said. Unknown Worlds leadership planned to share the additional money with all of the studio's employees, which number around 100. Staff who were at the company at the time of the acquisition were told they were eligible for bonuses ranging from hundreds of thousands to 7 figures.
Yeah, because that's like, so 200 and there's about 100 people there. What is that's like what? 250 divided by 100. That's like 20,000, right? Let me see. It's like 20 to 30, like around 30,000. Let's see. So if you have 250,000 and you divide that by 100, well, it's like, that's like, yeah, 100 each. Everybody's gonna get like a $3,000 bonus, but it's probably like more divided. You know what I mean? It's probably not like straight even.
The people said. But Crafton would go further. They would start straight up attacking these founders, saying that 90% of the $250 million payout was allocated to those 3 co-founders. So they were pretty much revealing to everyone that the majority of this money was going to 3 people, that they weren't sharing it with the rest of the studio. Additionally, Crafton accused the executives of abandoning their responsibilities in order to work on other projects, including a film, leading to delays for the game. Their official statement would say, "We are deeply disappointed by the former leadership's conduct, and above all, we feel a profound betrayal by their failure to honor the trust placed in them."
Oh, okay, yeah, they're going for the
and
throat.
During this very tumultuous week, the new CEO of Unknown Worlds would take questions from employees during a town hall. Someone would ask, "Did you guys delay this game to not pay out the bonus?" To which he would say, "It's a good question, and I would appreciate patience on this particular topic." He would then double down on the fact that they really want this game to release in an amazing state, that they take the
Yeah, isn't patience on this topic? Doesn't that just like make it easier for them not to pay out the? Sorry, doesn't it just make them easier for them not to pay out the bonus? Because patience on the topic means more time, and more time means like, oh, hey, you're technically not gonna reach your goal by this time, so we're not gonna pay you a bonus.
game very seriously.
So
which
scummy,
is
bro.
why it was delayed. So look, the more we learned about what was going on behind the scenes, and the more Crafton released statements about this whole mess, it really was starting to feel like the bonus did have something to do with this.
Oh,
At the end of
absolutely.
the day, Crafton wasn't the studio behind Subnautica 1. The co-founders were, though, and their story was so different from Crafton that it caused a lot of concern. By now, people really didn't know what the hell to believe. They were just sad that this game seemed like it was never going to come out. And speaking on the game coming out, on the same day the Bloomberg article would come out, Unknown Worlds would make a statement on their website saying, "An update on Subnautica 2 early access." Here they would reiterate that they got feedback for Subnautica 2 and that it simply wasn't ready to come out in 2025 as it was already planned. And so the new date for the early access release of the game was going to be in 2026.
Yeah, that's crazy because the guys who made the first one literally said that it was ready to go. They're like, guys, it was ready to go. It was ready to go in 2025. And that I definitely am on the camp of they definitely pushed this back on purpose. So that they wouldn't have to pay the bonuses.
Actively delaying it by a year. In parallel, they would also
Which is crazy because they would have made the money back,
saying that this was their way of showcasing their confidence with how the game was coming along. But as people were barely starting to process the fact that the game was going to be delayed by a year, one day later, on July 10th, 2025, Charlie Cleveland, the ex-game director of Subnautica 2, would, on his own website, release a blog titled Lawsuit. In it, he would say, "Hello, everyone. It continues to be an explosive and surreal time for the Subnautica team and community. None of this is what we wanted, but we truly appreciate the amazing support we've gotten from everyone and means a lot to us, especially now. As I wrote last week," he's referring to the Reddit thread, "we know in our souls that the game is ready for early access. That's just how we roll, and we'd like nothing more than for you to play it. Game devs live for this, but it's not currently under our control. We've now filed a lawsuit against Crafton. The details should eventually become, at least mostly, public. You all deserve the full story." Suing a multi-billion-dollar company in a painful, public, and possibly protracted way was certainly not on my bucket list, but this needs to be made right. Subnautica has been my life's work, and I would never willingly abandon it or the amazing team that has poured their hearts into it. As for the earnout, the idea that Max, Ted, and I wanted to keep it all for ourselves is totally untrue. I'm in this industry because I love it, not for the riches. Historically, we've always shared our profits with the team and did the same when we sold the studio. You can be damn sure we'll continue with the earnout/bonus as well. They deserve it for all their incredible work trying to get this game into your hands.
Yeah, because honestly, that's what it sounds like to me. Because for one, the guy made that story on, he posted that story on Reddit about his hold on. He posted the story on his Reddit about his game development journey. You know what I mean? And he posted his story on Reddit about his game development journey, right? And if he really was just about the money, like when they sold the studio for that much money, they could have just been living good for like a very long time, bro. Like I said earlier, chat, like imagine you get like, okay, so they sold it for 250 million, so you get 80 million out that, bro. 80 million, bro. I am so good for such a long time, bro. First things I'm doing, I'm buying my apartment. You know what I'm saying? I'm paying everything I need to pay for like the next 10 years at least, you know? And then like just making this place like the coolest spot you've ever seen in your life, right? I'm living like a lower not I'm not gonna go get a high rise apartment, is what I'm saying. So yeah, they're living for a really good time. They're living comfortably for a very long time. So the fact that they didn't do that, it does show me and it does tell me that they weren't all just there for the money.
Stay tuned. Signed, Charlie.
Which is also why, I'm not saying probably, I assume that this is why it hurts so bad for them to get that email randomly one morning.
So I just like to point out something, right? This all happened in like barely 8 days. All right, they got fired on July 2nd, and this is happening on July 10th.
What a whirlwind of a week.
As a Subnautica fan, you were waking up every single day with like a slap to the face. What the hell's happening? So this blog post re-emphasized the game was ready. It was meant to release. Crafton stopped us. And on top of that, the final paragraph here was a dig to the statement Crafton made about the co-founders, about the fact that they were intending to keep 90% of the bonus between themselves. Things were getting nasty.
That's so shady.
And so 6 days would pass.
That's so shady to say that.
Would again make a statement, this time on Twitter, saying, "Hello, everyone. The saga continues. In my previous post, I mentioned that there would be more to come. Well, today you can finally read the official complaint the original Unknown World shareholders have filed against Crafton. It's unfortunate we are here in this situation, but we're doing everything we can to make things right for everyone. Openness and transparency is my thing, so we're glad to bring this truth to light." It was official. The lawsuit was moving forward, and we had access to the complete complaint to see exactly what the problem was.
My cat running around.
The complaint itself was around 58 pages. It was uploaded on Scribd, I guess that's how you call the website, and it would be viewed by almost 100,000 people.
Holy crap.
Charlie and the other two co-founders accused Crafton of deliberately sabotaging and delaying the game's release to avoid paying out the $250 million that was agreed upon during the acquisition of.
That's what it sounds like.
One of the concluding paragraphs here is really interesting. It would say, in short, Crafton flagrantly breached both the letter and the spirit of the promises at the very core of its agreement to purchase Unknown Worlds. It promised to leave creative and operational control in the hands of the founders. Promise broken. It promised to consult with the founders before taking any action that could harm the earnout. Promise broken. It promised not to take any action with the primary business purpose of frustrating the earnout. Promise broken. And it promised
Some of these, the E and R's, the E and A's being so close together is kind of bothering me on this, but it might just be the website that I used it on. I'm not accusing him of anything, by the way. I just want to make that clear. But yeah, and like all this seems to be true. And especially if they have that all in writing, bro, it's like trying to use ChatGPT to get out of that is crazy.
not to terminate the founders without cause. Promise broken. Why? Because Krafton knew that allowing the founders to launch Subnautica 2 as planned would generate enormous commercial success and require Krafton to pay the $250 million earnout. By firing the founders and delaying the launch, Krafton can capture, what's left of, the game's commercial success without paying the Unknown Worlds team a penny of the earnout. So as you can see, this accusation was not light at all, and it was aired out to the public. Now everyone knew what was actually going on here. This went against the entire spirit of the acquisition, and it seemed like Krafton was playing very dirty. At the same time, during all this, someone would leak some internal slides from Krafton. It dated back to May 2025. And we can see Krafton's logic to delaying the entire game's release due to, like, barely a couple of things that were changed. 2 biomes were removed. A small amount of creatures were not there. Some equipment was reduced. A custom game mode was not there. And there was 1 narrative that was delayed. Due to these things...
That's crazy. That's the stuff, that's what I expect to see in an early access game. Like, I expect this, those are like those little things that can be changed like that. Those are the things I expect to see on a full release, not on early access game.
Krafton argued that this entire game needs to be delayed 1 year, even though it was meant to release in early access. Even though Subnautica 1, when it first released in early access, barely had any of this. It had like maybe 1/10 of all the features. This gave even more ground to the argument that the founders were trying to make. When these slides leaked, Krafton would immediately make a response, saying, "The document that has been circulating on social media and reported by various outlets is indeed part of an internal milestone review conducted as part of Subnautica 2. Milestone reviews are conducted regularly in collaboration with Krafton's creative studios across all projects. These reviews help assess development progress, define clear objectives, and ensure that each project aligns with Krafton's standards in both creativity and quality. This process is central to Krafton's commitment to delivering polished, high-quality games at the right time."
So they just admitted that it was real.
Thing is, though, part of the deal of acquiring Unknown Worlds is that they wouldn't interfere. This was not a decision that was up to them to make. And what went against this narrative was the fact that in the lawsuit made by the co-founders, you'd see a section saying, one of Krafton's El Segundo publishing employees reported to Gil, who was the CEO at the time, one of the co-founders, that Krafton headquarters told all Krafton teams to stop all creative tasks related to Subnautica 2. The employee supervisor even demanded that he and his team cease communication with Unknown Worlds altogether. So they went against every aspect of the acquisition, lied, and made the co-founders look bad as if they weren't working. And on top of that, were isolating the studio from being able to make progress. This is what was at stake here. And so the next step in all this would come almost a month later. On August 12th, 2025, Krafton would counter the lawsuit, arguing that actually the only people who broke this agreement were the co-founders. In this almost 102-page document, in which Krafton gets questioned a lot of questions and they answer, they would also make their case as to what exactly happened from their point of view. And they'd say, things fully veered off course by the spring of 2025. Unknown Worlds received extensive feedback from Krafton's internal publishing teams, which indicated that Subnautica 2 was not ready for release. Krafton's CEO warned the key employees that a premature early access release of a highly anticipated sequel like Subnautica could cause irreversible harm to the entire IP franchise, pointing to the sequel to Kerbal Space Program as a prime example. But as the end of the earnout period drew nearer, the game was still nowhere near its planned scope. Indeed, as late as March of 2025, only 2 months before the key employees claimed the game was ready for the first early access release, the development lead for Subnautica 2 at Unknown Worlds noted that the first early access and second early access, planned for December 2025, would only be about 12% of our intended 1.0 scope, and joked that at that rate, we would be in development for 30 years. The key employees became desperate. If development of Subnautica 2 continued at its current pace, the key employees would miss out on 4 quarters of
Oh, wow.
consecutive revenue they needed to maximize their earnout, which expired in June 2026. So see, this was new info. Bloomberg reported that they needed to make all this money by 2025. No, the
Yeah.
deadline was actually June 2026.
Dang.
That was the deadline for making the most amount of money possible to qualify for that bonus. The lawsuit would continue. Cognizant of this and faced with a choice between their own monetary interests and the best interests of Unknown Worlds and the Subnautica franchise, the key employees insisted on moving forward with a premature early access launch of Subnautica 2. Krafton would then argue that they were so worried about the game flopping, they were so worried about the game's reputation and disappointing fans, that they had no choice but to get rid of them and get things back on track. But the accusations wouldn't just end here. In Krafton's counter, they'd argue that when they told the co-founders that they were going to get fired, the co-founders said, well, hey, we'll just release it on our own. Fuck you. So they downloaded countless files related to the game and left with them. Krafton would claim that they stole the blueprint for Subnautica. Here's what they exactly said. The key employees refused, threatened to self-publish Subnautica 2, and, anticipating their termination, stole hundreds of thousands of Unknown Worlds and Krafton confidential documents before they were fired.
Honestly, that just proves that they were doing what they needed to do. Like the fact that they were saying like, you know, fuck you, we're just going to self-publish it ourselves. It's like that to me seems like someone who's an indie developer who was getting screwed over by a giant publisher or like a giant like company. You know what I mean? So like them putting out this statement honestly hurts their case even more.
Presumably in furtherance of their plan to unilaterally self-publish Subnautica 2 and capitalize on the earnout. This was complete character assassination of these co-founders, right? Making them seem like they're money-hungry goblins that were willing to set everything on fire just to get that payout.
I don't see it that way.
Brought to court, we were faced with 2 very different stories. But unfortunately for anyone keeping up with this, for anyone wanting to see where this goes, they would have to wait some months before hearing back on what was going on because this was heading to trial. Like that's it. This was going to court. And so it wouldn't be until November 6th, 2025 that we saw an update to this, and it would be during a pre-trial brief. This typically happens after the discovery phase. So both sides had months to get documents, get proof, get anything to back up their claims. And what we would find here, I mean, objectively speaking, it didn't really make Krafton look any better. In fact, it made them look worse. This is actually the first time we see mention of ChatGPT during this whole debacle. But before we get to this, we have to understand just how crazy the things that were found about the...
Is it debacle or debacle? Is it, chat, let me know in the YouTube comments. Is it debacle or debacle? I don't know.
CEO of Krafton truly were.
I would say debacle.
Sum things up nicely. In the pretrial brief, the co-founders would allege that Changham Kim, the CEO of Krafton, was desperate to avoid paying them the bonuses required by their acquisition contract because of professional embarrassment that would result from the perception that he overpaid for the studio. Interestingly enough, the co-founders would also say that Krafton was fully aware of what was happening at the studio and even expressed support for it. On top of that, when it came to the claim that one of the co-founders abandoned development to focus on making a movie, the filing also claims that Krafton actually encouraged it. They would then go on to say, already concerned that Krafton had paid too much to acquire Unknown Worlds, Kim feared that making any earnout payment to founders would earn him a reputation as a pushover and endanger his position as CEO. Desperate to avoid such a professional embarrassment, Kim obsessed over finding a way to avoid Krafton's obligation to pay the earnout.
So this is all because he was scared people were going to think he was a bad CEO. That's crazy. Because like, if he had done this right and the game was like a super mega success, he would have like the reputation, like nothing would have happened to his reputation. Like you are on it. I feel like you already made it. Now, do I think that he overpromised on the payout? Definitely, for sure. But even then, like I feel like if you actually know you're a good CEO, then you know that like it's going to come out at the end.
The pre-brief claims Krafton head of corporate development Maria Park told Kim that Krafton would likely have to pay the earnout if sales targets were achieved, even if the studio heads were dismissed with cause. At that point, the CEO turned to artificial intelligence to help him brainstorm ways to avoid paying the earnout, the filing claims. ChatGPT likewise advised that it would be difficult to cancel the earnout.
Yeah, because that's true. Like, even if the CEOs are gone, he still has to pay out the employees because the contract is still there. And even ChatGPT was like, sorry, bruh. I don't know what to tell you. He said, That was his heart.
This is right here in the pretrial brief. And there will be a footnote in the page saying Crafton did not produce the ChatGPT conversations and, when pressed, confirmed that they no longer exist. God, I wish we had them. Dude, someone contact OpenAI, please. Of course, a company representative would just say no when asked if the claim was accurate, saying that this is nothing more than a distraction. But what's crazy here is that they're also alleging that the CEO had created something called Project X, an internal company task force, all with the purpose of not allowing the co-founders to get that bonus. We would find out later that Project X and everything involving it was actually ChatGPT's idea. Like, no, at this point, I refuse to believe this guy earned his position.
No
This has to
way.
be nepotism. How do you end up as CEO thinking that something like Project X is a good idea? Sounds like something that Elon
And
Musk
honestly,
would do.
his lack of self-confidence as being a CEO, I feel like is reflected by him using ChatGPT instead of being able to come up with a solution on his own. You know what I mean?
This pretrial brief, also through discovery, would get the Slack messages between CH Kim, the CEO, and Richard Yoon, the CFO of Crafton. Here we can see a conversation on the 27th of June, 2025, a few days before the firing. Richard Yoon would be saying, I had a phone call a little while ago. This time, the co-founders, are asking for $75 million for themselves and $40 million for the team members. They say they won't do it unless we negotiate the packages of the teams together. The bucket for the team members we are thinking of at present is $10 million. It might be easier to just take over, ... To which CH Kim, the CEO, would say, set a date and send a letter if you need to send it in advance. So this is when he would decide, all right, we're going to fire them and take over the studio.
Holy
The last
crap.
piece of the puzzle here that really paints the full clear picture is that Kim's contract as Crafton CEO was going to be up for renewal in 2026, which is why
Oh.
this whole thing was personal for him. He understood too late that this deal was actually not really good for him and his company, and he didn't want to lose his job. On May
And you know, it's the ironic part is I'm pretty sure at the end of this video we're gonna find out that he lost his job anyways.
2025,
But
he
this
even
looks
tried to
horrible in the
gaslight
studio.
Charlie Cleveland, the game director, telling him that paying the earnout would cause the value of the studio to drop significantly, and that he, as the person responsible for the investment, would have to take responsibility. Just outright embarrassing. And speaking of embarrassing, it gets worse. It gets humiliating. A few days later, on November 19th, 2025, Chang-Hen Kim, CEO of Crafton, would get questioned during a testimony for the trial. Here, he would admit, yes, he consulted with ChatGPT. It was actually his main legal advisor. He would say this even though a few days beforehand, during the pre-trial brief, a Crafton spokesperson would say, this didn't happen, it's just misinfo, you're trying to distract us from the main issue of the lawsuit. Here's what the CEO said. I started discussing this matter with various teams within the company to figure out what we could do. So I talked to the legal team, the finance team, and the corporate team, and the PR, all these various teams, and I also actually searched on ChatGPT to get faster answers to figure out what kind of rights we have. When asked why he would consult with ChatGPT on a matter like this, Kim said, I think, just like everyone else, I'm using ChatGPT to get faster answers or responses, just like Google search. The article
No.
from PC Gamer would say, during cross-examination, lawyers for the former Unknown Worlds principals also point out that in a June 2 message sent to Crafton head of corporate development Maria Park, Kim included a ChatGPT link
Holy
and
crap.
subsequently referenced the chatbot's advice directly. He'd say, now, ChatGPT is starting to answer that it is difficult to cancel the earnout. If so, this is a contract under which we can only be dragged around. The lawyers also point out that while that particular ChatGPT conversation was subsequently deleted, as was one about a no-deal scenario with the studio, others from around the same time still exist. On redirect, Kim said he deleted those queries because what I learned is that, from OpenAI, is that if you use certain important information concerning your company, then that type of information can be used by OpenAI for learning purposes. What a great...
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. As if, you know, that's the reason why AI is so bad, bro. It steals all your information and it uses it like over again. So like literally if he put all his information in about his company, somebody could go to ChatGPT and be like, how do I start a successful game developing company? And it just steals all of his trade secrets.
Great excuse, dude. And you know what? The dog ate my homework yesterday too. The article will continue. It's all rather messy. Kim, who acknowledged making dozens of ChatGPT inquiries every day regarding general business at Crafton, said he was merely using it to research his options, as he would with any other search engine. But with hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, not to mention the future of one of Krafton's potentially most lucrative games, I would think that shareholders would expect more from their CEO than just kicking it around with a chatbot. And yeah, I mean, that's totally right. Like, what are you doing as a CEO? What is the leverage of having you around if you're just going to ask a chatbot about
Hold on,
everything
can't
you're
just
doing?
throw it. Hey. What are you doing in there? Sorry, I had to make sure my cat didn't just throw up in the bathroom.
I mean, at this point, why not just replace him with a premium subscription to ChatGPT, or maybe even better, Claude, an actual AI that works? And as the article point out, the fact that barely a few days beforehand, the company denied the CEO ever using ChatGPT, and now him admitting this doesn't look good for the case at all on their side. So here we were at the end of 2025, and the most wishlisted game on Steam was held hostage due to a lawsuit. And make no mistake, this whole thing had happened because the CEO of Krafton had made a bad deal. He signed off on it. And now he wanted to run away using ChatGPT as his mentor. Fans were losing hope that they were ever going to see this game, and things were not looking good for Krafton at the same time. Lawsuits like this are typically very messy and take years to be done. So it came as a shock, I think, to everyone when only a few months later, we would get the opinion of the vice chancellor presiding over this case. And to say that it would be humiliating for Krafton and its CEO would be an understatement. On March 16th, 2026, the vice chancellor overseeing
So that's
the
really,
case
it really
with
did take
Delaware
less than 2
would
months. That's
publish
crazy.
a 91-page opinion piece
Holy
in
crap.
which we can see the verdict outlined. TLDR, Krafton must return control to Subnautica 2 Studio CEO. However, when it came to Cleveland and McGuire, the chancellor would argue, Jill is reinstated as CEO of Unknown Worlds with full operational authority over the studio. Because restoring him vindicates the seller's operational rights, I declined to return Cleveland and McGuire to the peripheral roles they occupied before their terminations. Gil, with his authority restored, may proceed with the early access release of Subnautica 2 when he deems it appropriate. So what this means is, for now, bringing back Ted Gill as CEO is satisfactory enough for the founders to regain full control of the studio, which is what they wanted. When it comes to the other two co-founders, their roles weren't that impactful to begin with. Having Ted Gill come back as the CEO, as the guy who's heading the entire studio's decision-making processes, is enough to give them back full control and not allow Krafton to decide things for the studio anymore. And on top of this, the Vice Chancellor would specify, to ensure the specific performance remedy is not illusory, the base earnout period is equitably extended by the duration of Gill's ouster. So that means for the entire time that Gil wasn't CEO, the clock wasn't ticking on the deadline for the bonus, which means he gets extra time to earn that payout. The sentence afterwards is also very important to note. It says, whether Krafton's actions wrongfully impaired the earnout and whether any resulting money damages are owed are reserved for the second phase of this litigation. So this lawsuit was not over. It's just that for now it was decided that yes, the co-founders need to get back control of the studio, it's in their right. But the question of whether Krafton deliberately wanted to sabotage the payout and whether the co-founders are owed additional money for the sabotage are reserved for the second phase of this litigation that will eventually happen. So this is far from over. This opinion piece would also talk about Project X.
Dang, it's still not over?
Understand more details about it, saying,
Did he
at
cover it?
ChatGPT's suggestion, Kim formed an internal task force.
I'm gonna skip a little bit.
That Krafton had intentionally leaked this, that either party is interested in mending fences. So yeah, the lawsuit was done, the CEO was reinstated, it seemed like justice was handed, but Krafton still owned the studio, 100% of it. They still had to work together, and it was safe to say that this trust was gone permanently. I mean, come on, what was this? It was a failed hostile takeover.
Yeah,
But hey,
literally.
A week later, on April 30th, 2026, Subnautica 2's early access cinematic trailer would finally come out. And yeah, listen, regardless of everything, the hype is still there. Almost 2 million views, 30th trending for gaming, and an incredible like to dislike ratio. I mean, 125,000 likes, that's crazy. Looks like these executives are going to earn their bonus whether Krafton likes it or not. We would also find out that the game would finally be releasing on May 14th, 2026. In the end though, Krafton had spent such a long time crafting its image. After the incredible success of PUBG, they sought to acquire more studios, grow their business, and truly push the idea that they cared about both their communities and the games that they produce. With something like this, they had essentially tainted their reputation into being just another EA game, just another corporation obsessed with money that's willing to screw you over if it meant saving on giving you what's rightfully yours. For that, they can thank their wonderful CEO who decided to employ ChatGPT as his messiah.
I'm just waiting to see if he got fired or not.
His messiah. And he'll make it very hard for the future CEO to make any deal with any company, because now they'll think, wait, are you just going to pull a Subnautica on me? And honestly, at this point, what's stopping if the next CEO also uses ChatGPT? Guys, if there's a lesson to take from this, it's that everything in this world is good in moderation. You want to use AI to speed things up? Go ahead, dude, but giving it control over your life, allowing it to feed your own delusions, and refusing to use your critical thinking skills will only lead to catastrophe. This is what happened to the CEO of Krafton, and this is what will happen to anyone who places so much trust in an AI chatbot. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I really appreciate it. If you want to see exclusive content, like a couple of videos every month from me,
okay, I just wanted to be on stream.
Then definitely check out stack.com. It's like Patreon, but better. And I'll see you in the next video, whenever that is.
That's awesome. What's it called? Check out this MUJIN video. Make sure you guys like this video right quick. That was crazy. That was actually crazy and so pathetic. Holy shit. Oh yeah, like, comment, and subscribe on the video too. Appreciate you guys.